A man known as Jigsaw invents a game that tests people's will to live by taking them through a series of deadly tests. One day, Eric Matthews, a detective police officer, is kidnapped from his house. He wakes up in the dark to find his leg in a shackle and begins to sob. Later, he sees a pistol in front of him. Then he reaches for the pistol, making use of his boot. But to his dismay, the pistol is out of bullets. Next, he picks up a flashlight and discovers a hacksaw next to him. Then he gladly tries to cut off the chain, but the blade is blunt. After that, Eric thinks of cutting off his leg so he can get his foot out of the shackle, but the saw is useless. So he finds a heavy object instead and crushes his foot with it to get out of the shackle. 6 months later, the police cut through a welded door to gain entrance to a room. Inside the room is a man's body blown to bits by a bomb. The inspectors, after investigating the room, conclude that he was held up in a place with several chains hooked to his flesh. A flashback shows that when the victim, whose name is Troy, wakes up tied to these chains, a tape showing Jigsaw on a screen begins to play, asking him to play a game. The game is for Troy to release himself from the chains and escape through the door. Troy tries hard, but he doesn't manage to make it out before the bomb explodes. Soon, Officer Carey finds out that Jigsaw's recent games have not been following his normal rules. This is because Jigsaw never took away people's chances in his games. But now, Troy was not given any chance to survive the explosion by welding the door shut. So, even if he successfully released himself from the chains, he was still going to die. At home, while Carrie investigates the tape found at the crime scene, she's kidnapped by a masked assailant. She later wakes up to find herself chained and trapped in a device hooked into her ribcage, ready to pull it apart in case it goes wrong. Jigsaw shows up on a screen just then and explains what she needs to do. Carrie is to reach for the key inside the base of an acid jar to unlock the device quickly before the acid dissolves it. On her first attempt, she receives a sharp burn and immediately removes her hand, splashing acid on herself in the process. But since she has no choice, she dips her hand into the acid jar completely the second time and grabs the key. Then, she successfully unlocks the device attached to her ribcage, but, unfortunately, the device doesn't release her and she's eliminated. Jigsaw's next victim is a doctor named Lynn Dinlan, who heads out to the hospital after an argument with her lover. When an emergency is being brought to the hospital, her superior looks for her and calls her to the ward since she's the best doctor in the hospital. Upon getting there, she doesn't buy the other doctor's idea of cracking open the child's chest. Rather, she suggests a simpler method that ends up saving the child quickly. After that, she goes back to her office where she's later abducted. When she wakes up, she finds herself in a workshop, tied to a wheelchair. A lady called Amanda shows up just then with a knife to silence her and then pushes her into a room to meet a man on his sickbed known as John Kramer. John is a patient with a brain tumor that cannot be operated on and now has only a few hours to live. He asks Lynn to play a game, which reveals that he is Jigsaw, and tells her that the consequence of breaking any of the rules is death. Amanda places a collar device around Lynn's neck and John tells her the device is linked to his heart rate monitor and will explode as soon as the heart rate monitor flatlines or when she moves out of range. So, all she has to do is keep John alive for his final game. If the victim successfully makes it through all the tests while John is alive, only then will Lynn be free to go. His last victim's name is Jeff, a man who seeks vengeance on another man for accidentally killing his son. He wakes up in a wooden box and tries to break out. Then, he finds a tape in the box and plays it. He's told that he has just 2 hours to leave the building. Jeff eventually breaks free from the box by accidentally tipping it off its post and breaking it. He gets up and goes around looking for his way out, then sees a note directing him to a door. Amanda monitors the game on a screen to give John updates about the game. At the same time, Lynn diagnoses John and later tells Amanda he needs to get to a hospital. Amanda yells at Lynn on hearing this, telling her John's not going anywhere. John sees this and instructs Amanda to follow the rules of the game. Suddenly, John starts to lose his health and Lynn rushes to save him. This causes Lynn to tell Amanda that John needs to have an operation. Amanda agrees but tells her the operation will be done inside the workshop. Jeff gets to the assigned room and the door suddenly locks behind him. He realizes he's in a meat freezer and also sees a woman named Danica Scott, stripped and chained in the middle of the freezer. He gets to know from a tape that she was the only witness of his son's death and she refused to testify. The game is to look for a key and either forgive and save Danica or leave her to freeze to death. After wasting time blaming her, Jeff later goes to look for the key, but when he gets back, she's already frozen. He flees the meat freezer and goes on to look for his way out. He is then directed to another room and upon getting there, He hears a voice crying for help. He traces it and finds a man tied by the neck to the bottom of a pit. The game begins as soon as Jeff finds out that the man is the court judge that gave the drunk driver a mild sentence. Rotting carcasses of pigs are dropped in a grinder and the product is passed into the pit, with the judge inside. After also wasting time blaming him for setting the killer free, Jeff eventually forgives him and goes to look for the key. Then he climbs down the pit to rescue him. Upon seeing this, Amanda gives John the news of the second test while Lynn gets John ready for the operation. She administers an anesthetic to him, then with a power drill and an electric grinder, Lynn removes a part of his skull. After this, John goes into a trance, finding himself professing love to his wife and expressing it to Lynn unconsciously. This gets on Amanda's nerves, thinking that John has a thing for Lynn. Amanda leaves the room angrily and thinks back on how she became a part of John's life. After playing the Jigsaw game and winning, Amanda requested to become an apprentice to John. Her first mission was to capture Eric and she successfully did. Then, she brought him to John and put his leg in a shackle. Amanda then goes back to John, sobbing. She then attacks Lynn, but as she attempts to pull out her gun, John wakes up and cautions her. Then he apologizes to Lynn for her behavior. He tells Lynn that Amanda's weakness is her emotion. In the meantime, Jeff gets to the next room with the judge. There they find a man fixed to a rack ready to twist his limbs by 360 degrees. The tape from the room explains that the man was the drunk driver that killed his son. It's left to him to either save his life or leave him to be twisted to death. The key to unlocking the rack is fitted to a shotgun that will go off if he tries to get the key. The game is now to test if Jeff can take a bullet for the same man that accidentally killed his son, whom he has always sought vengeance on. After that, the game starts and the rack starts twisting his limbs. Jeff wastes time contemplating whether he should save him or not until the judge convinces him to and prevents him from being an accomplice to murder. In the process of retrieving the key, the shotgun goes off and the judge accidentally runs into it. Jeff however grabs the key and intends to rescue the man when it's already too late. The rack twists his head before Jeff gets to him. Soon, John engages Lynn in a conversation and holds her hand. Amanda sees this and becomes even angrier. So, after she announces that Jeff has passed the third test and is on his way out, John tells Lynn she's free to go and asks Amanda to undo her collar, but she refuses. Instead, she cocks her gun and points it at Lynn while John tries to warn her that Lynn is more important than she knows. Amanda insists and John reveals that it's Lynn who's holding her life. Both the ladies don't understand this. Amanda thinks John is giving her control over her while Lynn promises not to disclose her identity to anyone. While pointing the gun at Lynn, she wonders why she's so important to John, but John tries to convince her that Lynn's not important to him but to her. Meanwhile, Jeff finds a direction to the last room and also finds a gun with a single bullet. The last room is the workshop where John, Lynn, and Amanda are. Amanda shoots Lynn as soon as he enters and Jeff shoots her in return. While Amanda struggles for breath, John explains to her that he has been testing her will to keep someone alive. The reason he gave her the test was because she ruined everything and made all her games unwinnable by taking every chance to survive from her subjects. John then discloses to her that Lynn and Jeff are a couple and he only kept the information from her just so she could make her own choices. Now it's game over for her, and she passes on. Soon, Jeff points his pistol at John and pulls the trigger. He only hears a click. Then, John convinces him to stay with his wife and let him help to get an ambulance in 4 minutes. Jeff accepts and John gives him a final test. He tells Jeff where to find weapons that he can use in putting an end to him. He tells him it's up to him whether he'll forgive or kill him. After great thought, Jeff tells John he forgives him but later eliminates him against his wife's caution. The collar around Lynn's neck then goes off just when John's heartbeat stops and kills her. Jeff sits in regret and listens to the tape which John gave him before passing on. John says that he has to pay the price of unforgiveness. He has abducted Jeff's daughter and she's currently in a room with a limited supply of air. But the most important thing is that, for Jeff to get her back, he will have to play one more game.